I planted this field of soybeans behind me on May 10th. Then at the end of May, beginning of June, we had over 5 inches of rain. So we had a large portion of the field that drowned it out. So we came back out with the planter, replanted that. Then just over 2 weeks ago, we had 13 inches of rain, which as you can tell, washed out even more of our soybean acres. And today, July 8th, here I am, latest ever that we have the planter out here. We're gonna start putting in some more soybeans in all of our drowned out spots. This time, unlike the last time when we replanted, rather than always staying with the soybean rows and going a half mile, turning at the end, and just trying to make the fields look good from the road, today, since basically we have too many drowned out spots in all of our acres, we're just gonna take the planter, start making big circles around the outside of our drowned out spots and try to fill in between. Might not always be straight with the rows that we already have here, but if anything, it's gonna at least fill in all this bare dirt that we have. And we're off planting now. Honestly, this is a first for me because normally when I am running the planter, we want to make sure we're using the GPS, getting our lines nice and straight, making sure that everything's parallel, just so when we come back with the sprayer, the combine, it just makes it easier on the operator. But because we didn't want to waste a ton of time throwing down soybeans that honestly, it's so late, they might not even yield worth a hoot, we're just starting to make big S's out in the field with some 07 soybeans here. Just finished getting the outside portion done of our first big wet hole we're gonna fill in. As you can tell, that was a total of 6 acres. Still gotta fill all this in here that's drowned it out. So I'm just gonna snap a straight line going in this direction, which is a crossways with the rows, but that way, as you can tell, this way I won't have to turn around as much. So we're gonna snap a straight line here and start filling in the big empty spot we have. Now you might be thinking, Matthias, well, if these soybeans aren't gonna yield anything, why even bother wasting your time planting them out here? And honestly, there's a couple reasons. Reason number one, if you look at all this black dirt where we're located here in southwest Minnesota, it is windy almost every day. And if we don't raise a crop out here from now up until October, that leaves a lot of time for the wind to blow and to erode away a lot of our very valuable topsoil. Reason number two, like these soybeans that didn't drown out here, we want a crop canopy over the soil. That way it prevents not only erosion, but also weeds. Not only if we leave that soil bare for this year will we have a weed problem this year, but all the weeds will go to seed and then we'll have a weed problem next year. So we're trying to prevent a weed outbreak by putting some sort of cover on the soil. And the third reason, which is the one I personally forget the most, is soil's a living organism. So no different than us as humans, we need food, water, oxygen to live, which is why I have our little fridge inside the cab here stashed full of Powerades and a bunch of snacks for when I get hungry. The soil's no different, right? So it needs food, which I'm trying to provide by starting to grow some new soybeans here out in this field. It needs water. Unfortunately, this year we've just had too much water, and oxygen. Finished filling in that drowned out spot over there, and it's telling me over here on the iPad that I planted a total of 13.6 acres. Here you can see all the zigzagging around I did. Now I'm thinking, while I was filling that in, 13.6 acres, if you take that time, say an average yield of 50 bushels per acre, which you're really not going to want to hear this if you're a farmer because it's almost going to want to make you sick. So 13.6 times 50 is 680 bushels. That if we don't raise a single crop out in that drowned out spot, we're going to lose 680 bushels. And right now, say a fair price for soybeans come harvest is 10 bucks. 680 bushels times 10 bucks, $6,800 of revenue that our farm lost in just that drowned out spot right there, which is just one of many in this field as I'm driving along to the next one. Here's the next drowned out spot we gotta fill in. It's really hard to guess how many acres it is. I stepped out of the cab because I noticed there is one spot that's still just a little bit tacky here. So I'm gonna make sure I don't plant through that, otherwise it'll plug up the planter. But now we'll start outlining this drowned out spot with the planter. Six hours later now, the can tell the sun's starting to go down. I finally finished replanting out at this 160 acre field. On the iPad here you can see I filled in a total of 32.7 acres. And there's a bunch of different spots. This is why it takes so long, because you gotta fill in. Like spots like this, I just started turning around the middle, but then some of these other spots that were smaller, I drive to the edge of the field. It's only 7 o'clock, but we still have like 4 or 5 more fields that I should fill in a bunch of drowned out spots like this at. But to tell you guys the truth, I just don't feel like doing it. It's just super demoralizing riding in the cab of the tractor and seeing all of the bare spots out in the field, and even spots that have really thin stand, because the soybeans we're putting out here, they're nothing more than a cover crop. Really, we could have been planting oats, rye, or wheat out here, but we chose to plant soybeans thinking there's an off chance that if the sun starts to be really powerful this last half of the summer, that we might be able to harvest it. But the way things are looking, it's basically going to turn out to be just a cover crop for us. And it's really heartbreaking because the prices really aren't there either this year. So this year's a rough year on the farm, but obviously Mother Nature and the Creator above have other plans that we don't know of here down on Earth. So all we can do is hope and pray for the best. So although I should head to some other fields, keep planting for tonight, I'm kind of just beat up over the whole deal. So I'm gonna call it a night, try to blow some steam off, probably lift some weights, go for a run, but I'll catch up with you guys in the morning. It's a new day, a beautiful day here at the farm. The first thing I gotta do, since my parents are gone for the day, is I gotta get the seed tender out of the shed here. We gotta load it up with some soybeans to fill up the planter to head out to the field. Now normally to fill the seed tender here, I'd get the auger out and just auger the soybeans in. But because the auger is buried in one of the other sheds, today we're gonna get a little bit creative with how we're loading the seed tender. Now before I start to dump this mini bulk bag inside the tender, let me just say, I would not recommend doing it this way, although this is what I'm gonna do to try to get it done a little bit quicker. Here we go. The seed tender's loaded up and ready to go. Already have the planter unfolded. Ended up putting one mini bulk in the front compartment and one in the back. I'm only gonna unload one, split up between the 2 tanks here on the planter since it's still pretty soft out in the field. But that way, if I do have to come back to the yard to reload up with some more beans, everything's ready to go. Now I just gotta fold the planter up and we'll be on our way to the field. You heard that aching sound when the planter was folding up there? If Dad was here today, you know what he'd tell me? Matthias, that sound is the planter telling you it's ready to be done for the year. It's ready for its off season. But unfortunately, we still have a few acres to fill in. The field we're about to head to with the planter is about 20 miles away from the main farm here. And because there's still a fair amount of gravel roads that are closed from all the flooding that we had, and there's some of them that are still washed away, I'm just gonna take the tar road with the planter and tractor today. It's less than ideal because it's hot out and it kind of ruins some of the rubber on the tractor tires, but I'd hate to go down a gravel road and end up in a bad situation where I need to turn around. So we're just gonna take the tar road all the way over to the field we're gonna start at. Made it to the field that we're gonna get started on. I already got the planter folded out. And since this field's a half-mile long, the rows, it's gonna take too much time and effort, and I'm gonna run over a lot of good beans at the ends turning. So it's just gonna start making some loop-de-loos here in the middle and put our cover crop of beans in. One thing nice I would say that we did change in the last couple of years, which is helping with this job, is we're now able to control our row cleaners inside the cab here. So I just went through a spot where a bunch of the corn stalks got washed up. So to help push some of those soybeans through that corn stalk residue, I just pushed the row cleaners down with the gauge here inside the cab. Now before I get too far with the planter, I wanted to step out and check the depth, because believe it or not, the rest of this month, it's actually now supposed to get hot and dry. The weather changes almost every other day. So I lowered the depth here on the planter. So we're planting about 1.5 inches deep for the soybeans. So I want to double check that with our seed finder. There's the top of one of the soybeans right there. Now we'll stick this in, and we come up with a reading of about 1.75 inches, which I'm gonna live with, because if it does get really hot and dry, the only way the soybeans are going to germinate is by putting them in some moisture. And at 1.75 inches, there's plenty of moisture down there for them to germinate. And if the heat starts coming 3 days, these beans should be popping right out of the ground. I finished up this first field of the day. It's telling me here on the monitor we planted right around 10 acres. So now I just got to fold up the planter, then we'll jet back down the road and start heading on to the next field. Made it to the new field where we got to do some replanting out here. Now we just got to start inputting and getting everything ready here on the displays. On fields like this where we've already been out once to plant it the first time, a second time to replant spots like this that drowned it out, and now the third time where we have more drowned out spots, I'm just naming it Stevens replant ×3. That way we can keep track of all the acres we replant on each field, just going forward into the future and for crop insurance reasons. Dropping the planter, and we're planting beans again. I only have maybe 12 rows to fill in yet of this drowned out spot. But while I was going down, I started getting notifications and warnings inside the cab saying rows 1 and 2, not planting. So I took apart the speed tube, which takes the seed from the meter down to the ground, looked at the seed firmer. Obviously, this has a pretty good sized kink in it. That's junk now, but coming down here at our disc openers, you can see there we got mud packed inside here that needs to get cleaned out. The problem with the mud on the disc openers here now is this is what actually cuts the trench for where the seeds are placed in the ground. And now with all that mud stuck in there, the disc openers are basically glued together, so they're not able to turn and to slice open the soil. So I'm gonna try wedging some of that dirt out of there. Otherwise, if worse comes to worse, sometimes you gotta take the gauge wheel off and then the disc opener off and clean it off from the backside. Should have all the mud now out of the disc openers, just on these first couple of rows where it was plugged. Now just get this row plugged back in and we should be back in business. The only way really to know now if that was the fix is to try planting a little bit. So I got the planter in the ground. We're coming up on a spot where it's gonna start planting. As long as it doesn't beep at us, the 2020, which that's a good beep sound there, another good beeping sound. Looks like we should be good. Now we got this drowned out spot of this field filled in, but I don't really remember if there is any other drowned out spots in this field. My gut instinct says there is. So I got the drone along. We're gonna pop that up, get a nice bird's eye view to look to see if there's any thin stands of where we should bring the planter now, or if we should leave the field and head to the next one. We'll start in the corner, Get a nice bird's eye view across the field. So far I'm not seeing anything. All I can see is the spot that we just filled in. Otherwise, everything across the field looks to be good. Just made it to the next farm, and this field has a lot of drowned out spots, as you can see. What I'm thinking I'm gonna do is stay with the rows for most of this field, so basically end up replanting the whole field or covering the whole field. But that's probably gonna be the most efficient route on this field just because of how much is drowned out. Whoops. Sorry about that, guys. I thought I left you far enough away from the tractor and planter I wouldn't hit you, but it looks like I did get you. I'm at the last drowned out spot in this field, and I stopped ahead of it with the planter because this is where the sprayer got stuck in the field. There is still a fair amount of water here in these tracks left behind from the sprayer, so I'm gonna go around it with the planter. There is just a little spot right here I'm gonna hit, but definitely not gonna get close to this. Finished now replanting out at this field. I still have one more field of soybeans that I need to replant at. It's a 240 acre field. Probably have about 80 or 90 acres of it that drowned it out, and some of it still has water standing on it underneath, so it's going to be a few days before I'm out there replanting that field. In total, between the last 2 days of replanting, I know I planted over 120 acres because I filled these large CCS tanks up with 120 units of seed. So that just goes to speak, having Mother Nature as a business partner isn't the most fun thing, but that's reality of farming. So with that, it's gonna be it for today's video of High Tech Farmer. Thanks so much for watching. See ya in the next one.